July 11, 2009 marked the first 100 days of Najib's premiership. A group of 10 civil society organizations on Friday, July the 10th, called on the Prime Minister to meet a set of 10 key performance indicators for his next 100 days as Prime Minister. They stressed that through his commitment to a genuine and holistic reform program, will the Prime Minister be able to earn the full respect and support of all Malaysians.
With the Prime Minister's 100th day in office. Before I begin, I will just introduce the group of people with me here. Starting from the far right is Ong Jin Cheng, who is representing Persatuan Kesedaran Community Selangor, or Empower. And then is Mr. Liao Kok Fah, who is chairperson for the Civil Rights Committee. And then we have Dr. Lim Teck Yi, who is the Executive Director for the Center for Policy Initiatives. On my left is Encik Zaid Kamarudin, who is President for the Jamaah Islah Malaysia. Next to him is Wong Chin Huat, who is Chairperson for the Writer Alliance for Media Independence. Next is Haris Ibrahim, who is Convener for the People's Parliament. And on the far end there is Tan Mung Hui, who is Coordinator for Suara Rakyat Malaysia, or Suara. Thank you for coming. What we will hope to do is to go through some of our, or at least our calls to the Prime Minister in terms of his term in the office, and taking on what the government has talked about in terms of the key performance indicators. So what I'll do is I'll just start on and go through the 10 indicators that we think are relevant and necessary and urgent, and then I will open the floor to my colleagues to raise any other issues they would like to, and then open to the floor. So as you know, July 11 marks the first 100 days of Najib Abdul Razak's premiership, and there's been a lot of talk about things that he has put in place in terms of economic liberalization, in terms of the stimulus package, which are all well and good, but we are also concerned about the extent to which political and civil liberties have been threatened and continue to be threatened. In terms of the economic liberalization policies, we are also concerned, for example, that in terms of practices like corruption, cronyism, and abuse of power, and we are wondering whether the major constraints in terms of the economic gap, in terms of the gap in income, will they be addressed, and whether environmental sustainability will also be addressed. And of course, fundamentally, what is the important thing is whether there is good governance in this new leadership. A lot of talk of reforms, but we are still not seeing the basic issues in terms of enhancing good governance, accountability, and transparency. And if the government insists on maintaining the current authoritarian system of political control, then the ideas for reforms or economic liberalization will be seen for what it is, and that is a thinly veiled attempt aimed at ensuring that the present political elite stays in power. So we have collected ideas, suggestions, feedback on what we think the next 100 days should be for the Prime Minister and his cabinet. We were happy to see that Tan Sri Dr. Koon, who is Minister of the Prime Minister's Department, talk about key performance indicators. But let's share what our vision, what our ideas are for the key performance indicators for the Prime Minister. And this is coming from civil society groups. So we would like to suggest 10 key performance indicators for the next 100 days. And what I'll do is I'll just mention what the major areas are, what the current situation is, and what we would like to suggest as the KPIs. The first, and undeniably, is the Perak constitutional crisis. Now, the assessment is that, well, it is a deepening crisis which threatens the future of our democratic way of life. And what do we want? Our key KPI for Najib is fresh elections for the state of Perak. It's as simple as that. Obviously, but not so much to them. The second is in terms of electoral system and process. Our assessment is that it is neither free nor fair. There are some explanations we have put into our statement as well. And our KPI for the next 100 days will be to set up a royal commission on electoral reform before the next constituency redelineation exercise. The third is the judiciary and the prosecution. Our assessment, it is still controlled by the executive. And our KPI is the setting up of a parliamentary select committee on judiciary and prosecution reform. The fourth is the parliament, where we feel that it is still very much controlled by the executive, and our KPI is a Royal Commission on Parliamentary Reform. The fifth is Internal Security Act, where we feel that if the present government continues in terrorizing innocent Malaysians who differ in their political opinions from the BM. The KPI, repeal the ISA with no new laws allowing detention without trial. The sixth is the police. Assessment, well, it's still violating human rights, and our KPI is to implement the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission, IPC-MC, not the one that has just been passed in Parliament. The seventh is the media. We feel that, well, the media is still suffering from political control despite the results of the elections last year, and there was a call for opening up the media spaces. And our KPI is a parliamentary select committee on media law reform. The eighth is freedom of information, where it is still denied to the citizens. And our KPI is FOI laws both at the federal as well as the state levels. Ninth is in the area of local governments, where local representatives are still unelected. Local councils and local governments are unaccountable, largely unresponsive and very incompetent. And our KPI is to have local government elections nationwide. And the 10th is the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, where we feel it is still practicing selective investigations, still impotent in fighting against corruption. And our KPI is the amendment of the MACC Act to increase the institution's autonomy under optimum parliamentary oversight. So this is a very brief look into what civil society demands are towards for the Prime Minister and his government. And we feel that this is absolutely urgent, necessary, relevant, and that in order to have a much more, to strengthen the democratic institutions in this country, these are measures that need to be undertaken within the next 100 days. I'm going to invite my colleagues to stand up and hold a little message for the Prime Minister, which we hope is a total opportunity as well. This is what we really need.
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Di mana demokrasi, Encik Najib?
Di mana demokrasi, Encik Najib?
民主在哪里，首相先生？
Engage Jananayagam Najib.
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Where is democracy, Mr.
Di
Najib?
mana demokrasi, Encik Najib?
民主在哪里，首相先生？
Engage Jananayagam
Where
Najib.
is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Di mana demokrasi, Encik
民
Najib?
主在哪里？首相先生。
Engage Jananayagam Najib.
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Di mana demokrasi, Encik Najib?
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Where is democracy, Mr. Najib?
Where is democracy, Mr.
Di mana
Najib?
demokrasi?
Where is democracy, Mr.
Di mana
Najib?
demokrasi, Encik Najib?
Demokrasi.
Democracy.
Where is democracy, Encik Najib?
Where is
Where is democracy, Encik Najib?
Demokrasi, Encik Najib.
Yes, where's democracy, Encik Najib?